what really is Kundalini?
Kundalini comes from the word the kunda. It's the energy, the force which is inside of the body, which is supposedly mystically known to sit at the base of the spine. And when moved in the correct order, correct manner, it gives us that energy which we haven't tapped earlier. Or it gives us this potential which we don't know of earlier. It's always existed in us. But how do we access that force within us? Don't go to a Kundalini yoga class. You may land up in a mental asylum. So I'm bringing this here because, a lot of people have this myth. Kundalini yoga, you can actually access the power, or I would say the force or the life force, as soon as within a year and two, if you're a disciplined practitioner. Why? Because it includes the various elements of yoga practice, which is the exercises, the movement, or we say the asanas. We have mantras, we have the japa, we have mudras, we have breath work. We combine everything. So you continuously go into 11-minute movements. And for somebody like me who was being very careful about what I can do and what I can't, I literally let go of all of those thoughts, the grey matter in my mind, in the brain, and I just did as she said. And I did 11 minutes. That was a part of the class with the mantras flowing. And Kshitij, that was the moment for me. I knew I was home.
Hi, welcome to the Seek podcast. Seek is a global meditation app where we learn and explore different forms of meditations. This podcast is an attempt to further understand a specific type of meditation through a master. Today, our attempt is to understand what Kundalini Yoga is all about with our guest, Ms. Gunjan Amrit. I've personally practiced with Gunjan and it is magical. Gunjan has been teaching for over 2 decades now, and she's done trainings all over the world, including Bali, China, Hong Kong, and the US. She's also featured on NDTV, Aaj Tak, in various programs as a lead trainer for yoga. So here is Gunjan Amrit. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kshitij.
I'm very curious. The first thing I want to know is, you say Gunjan Amrit Naam. I'm very curious. What is Amrit Naam? I want to know the history of that name. Is that something that you've...
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to start with saying that my given name, my birth name was Gunjan and is still Gunjan. My spiritual name given by my teacher in about 2009 or 2010, I think it was Amrit Naam Kaur. So Amrit Naam Kaur is the spiritual name as given by the 3HO, which is a part of the organization in Kundalini Yoga. And the names are meditated upon. So they are not just randomly given. They see your original name, your given name, and then they see as per numerology, and then that's how you get your name. So Gunjan Amrit is my current name, but you will also see my name as Amrit Naam in many places, because my teacher likes to call me Amrit Naam. And to keep an identity of my given name, I keep Gunjan with Amrit, because then I get questions what happened to your surname and what really changed, and so it becomes quite a long process for me to start explaining.
So why is a spiritual name necessary? I'm just curious. Does it change something? Have you felt any change after you change your name? Or
so when I received my spiritual name, I didn't really immediately take to it. I actually felt that it's a responsibility for me to carry the essence of that name. Amrit means nectar. It means the nectar of God. My given name meant echo. So when I had to really feel, imbibe, and connect with that name, it took me few years. And why do we get it is because when it, like I said, when the numerology, when we put together our numbers, and we get different numbers, our path number, our soul number, our destiny number, and so on and so forth. That name is meditated upon, and that name, when I start to really use, I would connect, will give me that essence. So my belief has been that even the souls, as they come onto the planet, they choose their names, they choose their families, and all of this is chosen, it's predestined. So, the difference it's made for me when I have been connecting to this name is I truly connect to the essence and the meaning of the name. As much as I wasn't really aware of my given name, but this really gives me that essence of, especially coming from my teacher.
This is super interesting because I'm wondering if to make spiritual progress is necessary to change a name, or will it help people to think about changing their name so that it gives them a separate sense of identity which is different from the identity that they were born with.
That's it. That's a really good way you've expressed it, I think, yeah. The meaning to a spiritual name gives a meaning to a different identity. But in retrospect, you don't forget really who you are. Like, you're born with a certain name. There has to be a reason why, for me especially, why was I given that name, to why I was given a spiritual name. Not everybody wants a spiritual name. It's okay. I have my friends in the community who want to still keep the name they have. And that's not wrong or right. But just what you said, adding more meaning to life, adding more awareness to life. That's what my spiritual name has given me.
Now I want to just get down to, Kundalini. I know that I've personally practiced with you, and there's something special about it. You've been practicing for so long. It definitely moved a lot in me, which is why I also have deep respect for, what you do and how you teach. But whenever, Kundalini is being spoken about, there are so many teachers who speak about it. There's just so much mysticism around, what is Kundalini. It's been taught in different ways. So just want to understand from you what really is Kundalini.
So Kundalini, the Kundalini comes from the word the Kunda. It's the energy, the force which is inside of the body, which is supposedly mystically known to sit at the base of the spine. And when moved in the correct order, correct manner, it gives us that energy which we haven't tapped earlier. Or it gives us this potential which we don't know of earlier. It's always existed in us. But how do we really, access that force within us? So that power, the force which we feel the Creator has outside, actually also is inside. And to me, Kundalini is that life force, that energy which can, when unleashed in a systematic way, can actually give a human that potential which was never tapped into. So your prosperity, your health, your relationships, your day-to-day chores, everything starts to change when you start to tap into that dormant energy which starts to activate every single day with your practice. So Kundalini, in a nutshell, for me, has meant this. Day to day we look at how we keep ourselves happy. Some people think that being busy is being happy. That's being very, it's very fruitful if, you just keep yourself occupied and you're happy and you're etc. To me, that simple movements means more joy in your life. And if you truly become a practitioner, dedicated, disciplined practitioner, Kundalini means all of those, the happy hormones are constantly active in you. The flow of life, the energy which works in your body is always optimized. So to me, that is, in a nutshell, I feel Kundalini is just joy. Innate joy. No? Yeah.
I like your nutshell definition, by the way. I think we should all just stick to joy. Sometimes things are a lot more simple than people want them to be. I'm very interested to know that, there's a lot of theories, and a lot of people say this, that Kundalini, the untapped energy, sits at the base of your spine. And there are practices that are designed around it that can help you activate that energy in some sense, or bring that out. Why is it dormant in the first place? If why do I have to do anything to activate it in the first place?
That's something it's nice I can ponder upon right now, because so to me it's again very simple. To make a dish, some people can eat it raw, but they would still maybe want to just clean it up, and or even to get that, they have to kind of find the right produce, right? And to get to what they really want and what they desire. Now, to move this dormant energy, some work needs to be done. Like if we have to get to a destination, we have to create that path. We have to get to, I have to walk this way, I have to reach this place, etc., etc. There is an action which is required, and that action, or the karma which is required, is what is also required by humans. To say that, God gave us this beautiful body, perfect. Nobody can create a body. It's only the creation which can create this body. Now, to access that creation in its most natural, in its most organic way, we also have to follow some ancient practices which have made people see that moving a certain energy in the body, the dormant energy, which supposedly stays inactive till we do follow certain yogic rituals, techniques, technology. I think that's why the work is required. If you don't do the work, it's like, you can sit still unless you're karmically a meditator from lifetimes, and you can sit and you can, get straight in a meditation. But to access that power which stays like a dormant, unused, unutilized potential, we have to experience the movement. And when you do that begins to become alive.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, I understand that there is cause and effect associated with everything. So the same way we have to add ingredients to a dish to make it.
Absolutely. And so if you have to get to make a dish, you have to collect the ingredients. If you have to eat food, you have to collect everything.
Yeah.
If you have to access something inside of you, you have to make an effort.
Yeah.
And that effort can only come from individual knowing and understanding. You can be initiated by any teacher. But the real power is when you want to move that energy, and you realize that I have the potential. So it's like a law of manifestation. You'll manifest it if you really work with the law within your body.
Yeah, there's a lot of manifestation. I think it's become very popular these days.
Yeah, it is. I feel that you know, it's nice to kind of visualize and to go into this in this space of manifestation.
Yeah.
But the real manifestation is here.
Yeah.
The real manifestation is to manifest what is already within you. How much do you access it every single day?
Yeah. And how much, I don't know, the one thing that I always wonder about manifestation is its association or disassociation with action. So I think
exactly that's how, I think you said it, because it's exactly the same thing. Just sitting here, like this is a belief in the way I have seen. There are many masters and teachers currently who teach, and there are masters at very early age. In the holy scriptures, the way or in the Bhagavad Gita, as we see, it's the karma and the dharma. All these things make sense. I'm not going to say, just go by the belief of it, but it truly makes sense in our every single day of our lives. So if you're karmically born to a family, you're coming from a generation of meditators and yogis, then just sitting is not complacent. Then your sitting is also meditation. But somebody who's never experienced and is curious to know what is this energy, then you need to move yourself to access it.
No, I completely agree with that. I think there's also with manifestation, there is some intent setting at a deeper level, where if you tell yourself that this is what you really want, and people can call it manifesting, then that is the force that also drives you to act on it. So I think it's all connected. But you mentioned that there are these practices, a lot of these are ancient practices. What are the different practices that are there? And I know there is different forms of meditations that exist. There are a lot of these practices that have evolved in different places of the world, in different time, in different times. Where does Kundalini, the way you teach it, lie on that map? And why is that even important to know?
Well, that's a vast question, but let me try bring it to. So, if we have to see the different kinds of yoga, I'll just put it that way. Various kinds of yoga, like the karma yoga, then there is this Kundalini yoga and japas, so on, right? So there's Hatha yoga. So there are all these yogas, right? Different lineages. The root comes from the Hatha yoga, when our sutras come from Patanjali. Now, when there are various kinds of different yoga, there are various kinds of different meditation, where does really Kundalini come in? The Kundalini technology, at least the school I practice, comes from ancient practices over 5,000 years old. At that time, it was very sacred. It wasn't given to the common people. And over the years, it started coming through all the teachers and the gurus and the masters, passed on from people to people, yogi to yogi, and it reached householders, So the Kundalini practice we do is, I love to call it a technology, because, technology works these days. The word technology is like really the buzzword these days. This technology has many elements in it. It has the element of what one yoga does or the other lineage does, but we combine it in one technology. So where does this really come on the map? Kundalini is the essence. Basically, if we see that we bring in all aspects of every yoga, all yogas ultimately bring us to the force, the energy of Kundalini. So the practice can take a Hatha yogi practice. I remember my teacher saying can take up to 22 years as a beginner. And various other lineages have their, they have maybe specifications, but not to my understanding, because I've done various schools, but specifically with Hatha yoga. But in Kundalini Yoga, you can actually access the power, or I would say the force or the life force, as soon as within a year and two, if you're a disciplined practitioner. Why? Because it includes the various elements of yoga practice, which is the exercises, the movement, or we say the asanas. We have mantras, we have the japa, we have mudras, we have breath work. We combine everything, and the whole effect is 12 times more potent than any practice then.
Understood. No, this is 12 times more potent. Sounds.
It's 12 times more potent, and that's why, where does it really stand? I think end of, again, due respect to so many beautiful teachers in my life, I would always hear, end of it, everybody wants to come to that force of Kundalini. Every practice, yeah.
I've practiced Kundalini in your classes, and that's truly very, it's a very moving experience. I'm a big fan of that. I want to understand the way you teach it exactly. Where does that come from? If you could talk about your teacher, your teacher's teacher, what is that lineage that the Kundalini Yoga that you teach sort of comes from?
Kundalini Yoga I practice was started in the year 1969. It was given by the master Yogi Bhajan. He was the teacher. He brought it to the West that time. Passed down from many teachers is my teacher Gurmukh Kaur Khalsa, who's currently been teaching for over 50 years. And she still stays my mentor, my teacher.
I've heard so much about Gurmukh as well from you, and I see her and she's just so vibrant. She's you can't make out how old she is, and the way she moves, the kind of, the vitality that you can see in her eyes, in her face, much like yourself, is amazing. I have always been very curious because I've started meditation from a very first principles perspective. I started learning meditation from a book, honestly. But people talk of lineages. I always hear, and people have, very deep respect of whoever has initiated them into the practice. There's a certain quote unquote purity of the practice that needs to be maintained in the way it is taught. And when someone's asked to be a teacher, or when someone's eligible to be a teacher, why is the lineage important at all? Why is it really important to, understand where the lineage is coming from for anyone who's practicing today, whatever form of meditation?
So when we talk of a lineage, why is a lineage important? So I think the easiest way for me to understand this is that especially being brought up in this country, in India, and it could also be for any other country, aboriginals and, the ancestors, descendants and stuff. When we know that we maintain the ethnicity of that lineage, the whole lineage benefits. Just whenever, like even in our simplest prayers, we, a pandit would be performing prayers and they'll ask your lineage, your descendants, specifically we all have some different ones. And to me, that is where the whole information, the seed which was sown by the ancestors is carried on from the first descendant to until this age. So what really happens is, it's a very specific, you'll see the families have, the lineage will carry something very typically. There could be a certain feature, it could be a certain characteristics, it could be something very specific to certain lineages. And it's important for that to be carried forward, because it was done with, I'm sure there was a lot of processing around why it was given to the specific descendant and so on, various others, right? So lineage, when you make sure that lineage is carried on with the same discipline, this is where the lineage in the future, the future descendants will also benefit. The moment you break the cycle, if you don't carry on that path correctly, it's like Chinese whispers. The moment you give that information incorrect, the original word is lost and then something else will follow. But if you give that exactly the same way, you come exactly the same way. You take a full circle. So I'm not sure if this really answers your question.
No, I think I understand. I mean, because especially with something like meditation, it takes a long time for someone to understand it fully. And if you have understood it fully and you've become a master, you want to be very careful of, how certain things need to be done a certain way only. I know from my experience with even Vipassana, there is still S.N. Goenka's voice is used for the practicing. There is still this this order that, okay, once you're in there for the retreat for 10 days, then you shouldn't ideally come out in the middle as your brain is being restitched. There are things like that. So I do understand that if this technology or these practices aren't carried forward in the right manner, in the right way, then it could be potentially dangerous for anyone else who might be practicing that.
I think what you said is exactly that is exactly what it is. And also, there could be some questions which could always stay mystical. Why? Why not to come out of this for this day? Why not to come out? But that is where, if you follow the lineage correctly, is where you will start to discover those questions, answers. That's where you'll start to discover the answers to those questions, because you may not find the same teacher still in the living body, but when you actually follow the path, you will get awareness. Why was I doing this? Why was this given? So I think that is where it's very important to stay with the ethnicity of the lineage.
Yeah. It's almost like, when you have a small kid, you can't explain everything to that kid. But some things are just to be done in the way they're told to you. And then when we grow older, we realize why we were doing, something like that in the first place. And that there was really a rationale behind it.
Also, Kshitij, I think growth is such a natural progression, right? Even from childhood to until whichever age. So even to know that any process has its own time period. Like, for example, in my technology lineage, we have a 40-day practice, a 90-day practice, a 120-day practice. And there are specifications why we do it. It may differ for a person to person still, because it's an individual process. But keep following the practice, the technology, the lineage as given.
Yeah. I also feel that trust is super critical when it comes to something like meditation. If, I remember that when I was also starting meditation, and at that time very, very few resources were there that I could find. But the key thing that I was also understanding very soon when I started was that who I trust my mind with, or what practice I imbibe, or what words I listen to, actually end up influencing, you a lot. Actually ended up influencing me a lot. And it then became very, very apparent that trust is super critical. Unless that trust is there, you will not be able to leave your rational mind and trust something which you don't understand. So I think that was one learning for me as well. And I think lineage, and now obviously a lot of scientific evidence in whatever shape or form, helps build that trust for whoever's practicing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's very well said. And I think that's just how you put it, even a trust for a child. When the child is born, the only trust the child has in is his mother. So that any word from that identity is the truth for the child. And as we keep growing in our awareness, when our pituitary gland is making us grow. I mean, this is why we work on the meditation, and the pituitary gland has its purpose. When we are growing, when we get that trust in a teacher, in a lineage, that force can take us to become who we truly are here for. Who are we is another big question mark, but then it does take us to somewhere on that path. No? Yeah.
We've spoken about the different forms of meditation, the fact that, where Kundalini sits on that map and what lineage it comes from. I want to understand a little bit about, take us back to when you got into it. And there are a lot of people who have heard the word meditation, who hear, Kundalini and all these techniques thrown around, and they wonder if this is something that they should explore. Why is this even necessary? So what? And there are moments that come, or there are times that come that actually create that path for you to sort of adopt any of these techniques. And so what was that nudge for you? If you could share a little bit about what you were doing at the time, and then how you sort of came into this journey, when it started.
So if I go back to my practice of yoga, I started almost about more than 20 years ago, my practice. I was very fortunate to have amazing teachers. I think for me that's been the biggest blessing. If you find teachers who can, either ways, every teacher teaches you something. So I started my journey in yoga. Well, my firstborn was a few months old, and I had this excruciating pain in my left shoulder. He was about 10 months, and then I was, I found out about this yoga practice teacher, and I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna go for it. No second thoughts.
So your left shoulder was hurting?
My left shoulder was in excruciating pain. And by the time I had tried many things for months, therapy, this, that, nothing really was helping me. So one of my family members I'm very close to said, have you ever tried yoga? And I was like, I had actually never tried yoga. Though my mother would do yoga when we were in school, but we never got access to seeing what yoga was, neither in school. So I went for my first class. Just standing there, I should say exactly how I felt. The first class, and I knew I had some past life connection. That's exactly the way I saw it. And I told myself right there, 6 years from now, I will start teaching. It's mystical, right? But I find this is not mystical. This is something that we all have, awareness. And the awareness, when you're really in the flow of awareness and intuition, you are very well guided. So while standing there, I said, I'm going to be doing this in 6 years. Okay. That's how it started. Not that my pain went away, but I was a very disciplined practitioner ever since. So if I couldn't go for my classes, I would just look up for something, and that time there was yoga on TV and stuff as well. So I started really getting in it. I said, I'm not going to leave my practice because there were distances to cover, looking after a 10-month, 11-month-old child and stuff. The journey continued. And it came to a point when I also explored many other lineages, currently like we have all over in the country as well. So I was fortunate to have done many courses by then. When it came down to a point in the year 2007, just before that, I had while I was in the practice, sometimes in and out of it, I was very, very sick. I was very, very sick again. The sickness was, it was about me not being able to feel my limbs, waking up in the middle of the night, not knowing if I have my arms and legs, needing the help from my husband to kind of move. So I knew that I'm alive. Only my torso had the energy. Overnight cancelling my projects. I come from a background of fashion and retail, so I was teaching and I was a freelancer. And how would you feel? Like, one night you're just like, what am I supposed to do? So I got it in time when I realized my bone marrow there was not enough production. So, I had to just, I was told by my doctor that stop practicing yoga. Well, that made me worse. It made me super sick. So I started my medication, alternate medication. And then I had a teacher coming home those days for my family. And I have to give him a lot of respect, gratitude for what he did for my life. He said, get me your reports, and I was pretty assured he doesn't know what my MRI looked like. But he said, there's nothing wrong with you, just go for the yoga festival. We have this festival, many of us know this, there's an annual festival in Rishikesh. It's maybe many, I don't know, 20 some years now. And I was guided to go there. Last minute I was not sure, but then I said, okay, let me go. And he said, just go for the festival because you're really dedicated to your practice. I said, okay, I will go. And I was apprehensive because I was not in the best state in my body, because you had to be very careful. You had to be very careful of your nervous system. So thankfully I had a cousin who accompanied me and we both went. And again, thanking this lady I overheard on the railway station said, don't go to a Kundalini yoga class. You may land up in a mental asylum. So I'm bringing this here because, a lot of people have this myth and that, Kundalini yoga can do this to you. So, and the state I was in my body, I was like, I'm already like half dead. Let me just go for it. What am I going to lose anyways? So that is my first moment of entering my class, Kundalini yoga class with my teacher, Gurmukh Kaur Khalsa. She's 82 now. And there were 100 people in the class. I was right there and sitting and I practiced. And when you get to the practice of Kundalini and there are some exercises you have to go on for 11 minutes. Okay. So you continuously go into 11-minute movements. And for somebody like me who was being very careful about what I can do and what I can't, I literally let go of all of those thoughts, the gray matter in my mind, in the brain, and I just did as she said. And I did 11 minutes. That was a part of the class with the mantras flowing. And Kshitij, that was the moment for me. I knew I was home. It still kind of swells me with so much gratitude and the kind of love I feel for my mentor, because that was the moment I said I didn't even know. So I sat in the back of the class and I just cried for some time. I didn't know what happened and I was like, why am I even crying? Now this is where I stayed on every day and I went to her class. And the gift it gave me was, there was this opening within me where I could really it was palpable. I could feel something inside of me has moved. And I felt happier. Yeah. The joy I felt after being sick for so long and coming from this place of, I don't know what my life is for me ahead, because I was actually told it was leading to MS. And, MS is a lifelong autoimmune disorder. There I was. And here I am. I've been teaching for almost 2 decades.
Wow. This is really beautiful. I mean, this is the stuff of movies, honestly. But it's so good to hear that, for everyone, that, there are these moments that can come that can drastically change your life in ways that you can never imagine right now. Wow. So that's when it's so funny though that somebody told you that you'll end up in a mental asylum.
Yeah, and I didn't know I was so adventurous. Over the years, I think I haven't been that adventurous, but I realized, when you're hitting the bottom in your life, and you're just like, there can't be anything worse than this. I already had a child by then. My son was nearly 3 years old, and you just feel like, okay, he's safe at home, but let me get on with this. Whatever it I will experience will be. I'm sure I'm guided to experience that truly.
What is super interesting about this moment, I just want to linger on it for a moment, is that you had to let go of the gray matter. I think that's the phrase you used, and that's very interesting because meditation, I always feel, is more action. Nobody can think their way out of a bad situation. Nobody can really think their way out of anxiety or out of insomnia or out of stress or out of sickness. And the fact that you were able to do that, you were able to override this machine that's always running and pumping thoughts that may be desirable, may not be desirable, and just get to the practice. And 11 minutes is very hard. If you think that's easy, I've practiced with you.
I wish I could show you, actually sitting on your heels, and you have your hands behind you, and you have to keep going up and down. So you have to keep bowing down and get up, bowing down. And I was like, at some moment I was like, what is this force which is taking me through? So here I would say the trust came in. Here I would say the trust in my own self came in. The trust in my body that it can function came in. And then also the trust there's a force which is taking me through this. So I think that is where my universe opened.
Yeah, this is beautiful. So that's where your journey with Kundalini started. And then you started practicing regularly by yourself, or you understood the practices and you started practicing by yourself,
So
or
I
were
have
you?
no, I have a story. No, I didn't practice by myself. To my pleasant amazement, or whatever you may say, that as a mother, I was always very intuitive, and I had a very strong feeling I'm expecting my second child. So by the time I came back to Delhi from Rishikesh, I was 100%, and I was pregnant with my second child. And then my teacher, Gurmukh, sent me everything in regards to prenatal yoga. My husband did Kundalini yoga, and she sent us, those times we had DVDs. So they were all sent by her, and I practiced with instructions. I never practiced it on my own, which I mean on my own because I didn't have the material really, and it's a very systematic practice. It has to be done as given. This is why the lineage is important.
Yeah. So you practiced.
I practiced
Using that,
Yeah.
using those
Yeah.
videos recorded by.
Yes, I did a lot of prenatal, and that's when my practice was wholehearted from 2007 onwards, and then went on to becoming a teacher within a year.
So I want to understand, what made you, what brought in this feeling in you that you now want to teach. Because I'm asking you this because to be very good at something and to enjoy it yourself is very different from wanting to teach it. So what was that transition like, or was it just something that just happened?
So the transition of being a practitioner, which is still I am, to being a teacher, I was a teacher prior to teaching yoga. So let me go back a little bit. I was actually a teacher I was very creative from my school time. So I was a teacher in what we call visual merchandising in a very renowned school in India, in a fashion school. So that always made me very happy when I could share what I enjoyed. So it was always like being very passionate about whatever you share. I always love to share, whether it's about my day-to-day experiences in my classes or whether I've done something new. I always share with my students that, you should try everything. So that transition of, I just feel, what's the fun of holding and doing it? That's one part. Your practice is important, but to multiply that joy, I love to share that. So as I practiced the Kundalini Yoga. So to give you a little gist, before I did my formal training, I did my training in traditional yoga. There was always a calling. I also did training in transformational yoga, so Aurobindo way. So I was just kind of, literally, I would say, trying to make the best of my time, because I was really waiting for this training to come. With my teacher in India. And that's when, before I went into teaching it, as I read more and more, I did more and more practice. There's a beautiful quote, and the quote is, if you want to learn something, read it. If you want to understand something, write it. But if you want to master something, teach it. So I think to gain my own mastery, to gain my own self, as in, I would say the infinite mastery. I won't call it at the egoic at this point. Yes, we all have our egos. It's our teacher used to always say, you can't be a vegetable. You always have that little ego in places you need. So to master something, to really know more about myself, I think for me it's important to teach.
Yeah. No, I really like the fact that, one, obviously you were a teacher before and you genuinely have that joy to, and now you found this amazing thing that turned your life around. So there's the natural urge you felt to sort of share it with as many people as you want. And it also ties into the fact that this was part of your own practice. So you really felt that.
I think, Kshitij, as you keep practicing, and when you teach, if you truly can reflect on your own as a person, as if you're teaching it as a teacher, a teacher is a master teacher is they play a very big role in our lives. Either they can guide you, or either they will take you off. You'll be put off all your life and you'll never go back to that thing. So when you really want that role, it's also a great place to reflect on your own self every day. I feel that's where a teacher is. So be your own teacher first. That's how when we teach, when we do trainings now and makes people be teachers, create teachers, we tell them the first training is always about you. Be your teacher. So
yeah. And throughout the years, now you've been teaching for how long exactly?
So I formally started teaching Kundalini Yoga in 2009, immediately after my practice. But I was already teaching before that. I started teaching with kids yoga when I was already doing traditional yoga. So I used to teach the Hatha yoga and stuff, asana practices. And then formally Kundalini 2009 onwards I've been teaching. So, every place demographically, not everybody is very open. Everyone has their own likings, not everyone probably wants Kundalini yoga. That's fine. But then I was fortunate to have, taught few classes in China, in Hong Kong. Maybe I'm forgetting, maybe maybe in the US. And when it's very interesting, how people receive it, and how the whole technology of the mantras come in and so on. the only thing I would say is that it does leave people with this really that that feeling of being happy by the end. Even if they're dead tired, they would be still. They would have so much energy. So usually they would. Mostly, this is the feedback would be that they have so much energy, which is great, which is the dormant energy, which wasn't moved earlier. While teaching now is, as a trainer, when I'm assisting other lead trainers and stuff, that's when Bali and other places are now. We go and teach there. So these are already those people who are in the process of being teachers. So the experience has been amazing, Yeah, the more you share, the more, and also, like I said, demographically, there is, you can see how it's received in Asia, Southeast Asia, in other parts of the world, in Europe and other places, yeah.
No, that's beautiful, because then as a teacher, you also get to adapt and respond to different audiences. That further deepens your sort of teaching practice itself.
Even my regular classes, when I teach, I have people attending them from different parts of the world. And but the beauty is, by the end of it, you're not XYZ. The energy of Kundalini Yoga, if I say it's Ik, if I say Ik, Ankar is one of the mantras. It comes from the one. So the whole session becomes one. For everybody. Everybody experiences the wave of energy together.
Right. Yeah. One thing that I find very peculiar about your journey is that I know that you've experimented with multiple modalities, or, modalities is just another way of saying multiple forms of practices. I know that you've done access consciousness. I know that you're also an Ayurveda practitioner. And if you could talk about what, I'm sure I'm missing a lot of it, like we discussed. So if you could just touch upon all of these practices, and then very curious to understand how they all complement each other, or how it comes together in the way that you teach. Do you think it's beneficial, or do you think that there are elements that you can pick and choose?
I'll say one thing. Underlying force for every modality is energy. End of the day, we are beings with energy. How one teacher explains it with a certain modality is a certain root, a pattern, a lineage which has come in. For example, I'm also a certified practitioner for Bach flower remedy. Ayurveda is one of them. Somatic is one of them. Years ago, I was a Pilates. I'm also trained in Pilates. Traditional yoga, 3 different lineages I have practiced with. A list can go on. But then, what is the essence of everything? To me, end of the day, is energy. How are we accessing that energy? Some people can't do Kundalini Yoga. So, for them, getting a remedy is the way to start to move energy in the body. Some people have physical challenges, so they can only do a certain kind of modifications in yoga. Or they can do, for example, some therapy sessions with me. So how does that really help is, again, movement of the energy in a systematic way. If you're told A, B, C, D is the format, and if you misinterpret it, or if you say no, the C, D, H, F is the format, well, that will not take you to the formation of the right word and sentences. So just getting the gist of it, that when you know that you're an energy being, and all these practices, how I incorporate everything, the element is, my first foundation has always been Kundalini Yoga. My basic practice has always been this practice. So I truly, for me, believe that this has taken me to various modalities, whether it's pranic healing or whether it's access consciousness. It's taken me to various other modalities to even get that awareness. And understanding is not the word I would like to use a lot, because energetically you can't understand it. Energetically you become it. So I just incorporate that life force, and I just give it to people in the way they can receive. So that's how I probably use this work.
I know that, you also make an effort. It's very evident to learn new and new things, to constantly experience new things, and then something gets added to your own arsenal in terms of how you understand energy. So what's the latest that you're...
Yeah, that's the one. So this is another extension of Kundalini Yoga with the training in Beyond Addiction. It is these two beautiful founders, Dr. Gabor Mate and Sadharam Kaur is the teacher. So they've brought this beautiful training. It's not new; it's been there, but because it is an extension, we use Kundalini Yoga in it, and we use the essence of compassionate inquiry, the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, because psychosomatic is the place. It's everything is psychological. So I am in the process to train myself in that, and then eventually definitely teach that work.
Awesome. This is beautiful. I have another question about your, how you have to be as a teacher. And this comes from a place of, just curiosity for myself, because I've been practicing for very long. And I always wonder if that's a step that, does it even exist in the realm, or is it something that I want to do? Does teaching hamper with your existing practice? Do you still have to go on with your existing practice as you teach? Or does the practice that you have that is so internal, that's so personal to you, is that something that teaching, let's say, a 1-hour class can replace?
Never. So the first ground rule, thumb rule of Kundalini practitioners is sadhana. Sadhana is your daily practice, and it can vary for people about how much time can they do it. It's ideally a 2.5 hour practice in the ambrosial hours, ideal 4 to 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m., before 7 a.m., because it has a certain magnetic field. The earth, the sun, as it falls on the earth, the rays, there's a magnitude, there's a longitude, latitude formed at that moment. Now, when you meditate in those hours every single day, that is the time you can really change your vibration. And the force is with you. It's like the universal energy is saying, wake up and do this. Now, that can never be replaced by a teaching class.
So you actually practice yourself every morning?
Absolutely. My hours can vary, but my consistent practice, if I choose a practice, I keep it for 40 days. I have my everyday prayer, which is beyond 40 days. And then I have a proper meditation practice, which my day doesn't start without it. Yeah. My teaching any class won't make that effect for me if I haven't done my practice. Yeah.
That's actually very good to hear. I feel that without your own practice, if someone starts to teach it, then it may become a very thin layer to take out from sometimes. I want to just understand now from a student's perspective, and a lot of people who are trying to learn meditation or trying to learn Kundalini, what is it that keeps you going on an everyday basis? I know that your current situation, you're managing a entire household. You have 3 children, beautiful children. How are you able to manage everything and still make time for your daily sadhana? Because I keep hearing, and a lot of people keep saying this, that okay, I need to meditate, but I just can't find the time. Why do you think that is, and then why is it different in your case?
I don't know if it's different, but life situations are the real situations. If if we cannot incorporate what we truly connect with, whether it's a meditation, for some people it could be exercising, if we cannot incorporate it with our real life every single day, then you're not really living in a reality. You're probably living in, that's a mystical world you're probably living in. However, me being a mother, a householder, a very active teacher, a trainer, and many other hats I have to also say there's a big destiny playing there. I am not ever surprised that I have karmically chosen a family who has supported me. Like every mother, like every wife, like every daughter, I have my challenging days. If my children need me more, because my children are various age groups, and then I'm also needed at home when I'm needed. Kundalini Yoga was for householders. So this is one thing which has been the best, like a reminder to myself that at the end of the day, I'm a householder, and how can I incorporate this? Now, the only trick I have done in all my years is I don't separate my family. I include them. I include them in every single thing I do. I include them energetically. I make them see, I make them experience what I do. So they know that what really is that my mother or my wife or my daughter is doing. And that can also inspire them. It's up to them. I never push them. I never tell them do it. My daughter has done her training with me. She's already a teacher at the age of 16. And I think what you really do as a parent, you have to be very conscious parent. You can inspire your children by only your actions, not by your words. So if they know I am doing my meditation, that for few minutes the door is going to be shut. But it's not locked. Anybody can come in and go. So this is the way I practice. I keep the door open in a way that anybody can come in, but they also respect over the years. They know that this time is for her. And they also feel, I have to say that if their mother and the wife and whoever roles I play does her practice, she is more sane and she's more steady that day, So I think they naturally give me that time.
No, I think that's beautiful. I mean, the fact that, you've not only have you found time to practice yourself, but you've also, managed to inspire the people around you, and at least have them, have an open mind about it.
Choice. It's always the choice, no? End of the day. So, I can only play my role.
Yeah. Now I want to, talk about this new program that we've sort of designed together. I'm very lucky to, sort of have you on board. We've been working together for a while. Tell us about, tell everyone about this course that we're doing, which is a 3-week program. I want to understand from you how you've condensed a lot of your know-how into this course, and what will it include, and is it for everyone? Is it tough? Is it easy? Just want to...
So the first and the foremost thing is that I have kept the lineage as it is. I have gone by the word to word of how we are taught, and that has been taken forward to create the 6 sessions, experiential sessions for Kundalini Yoga for beginners. When I was a beginner myself, and I still stay a beginner, by the way, that's why I say this course is not just for the beginners. Let's not assume, even if you're an intermediate in any other lineage, even if you're an advanced practitioner in any lineage, this program can still be your foundation. How I have planned it. So when you asked me over the years my journey in yoga, I kept that in my mind. Following all the elements of Kundalini Yoga technology. My issue started with the spine when I was the first timer in a Kundalini Yoga. And I realized that how the technology can start to make these changes in the spinal column. So that's why the incorporation of spine is the longest muscle, right, in the body. Now, if our spine is not in a good shape, we say if we don't have a strong spine, we don't have a strong mind. We don't have flexible spine, we don't have a flexible mind. Our foundation is not there. So the whole 6 sessions are kept in mind with what can really integrate this practice and what can give you your experience. So we have the spinal series. The first is working on 3 parts of the spine. Then we go on to the next is the hemispheres of the brain. How is your spine connected to the brain? I really like, the visualization of, one kind of a, like a bone structure going up, or you can say like a flower. I kind of see it as a long stem, and I see this whole flower, and I see the flower is really here in the head, all the crown we say. So how do we move that energy systematically to bring us to the higher awareness when our brain hemispheres are not balanced? And that's directly connected to the spine. How do we even manage our practical aspects in the day-to-day life and awareness? Because these two are what guides us through that. And then when after that we go into the pranic field, I would say the field in the whole, this is the field, the whole body is a field. Now, when your movement of energy is systematic, your prana, your life force or the pranayam will actually work much better. Usually people really, in the beginning, it's a challenge for people to do pranayam. But this pranayam is not difficult. We've done very simple basic pranayam in this. And then coming to pranayam, we also have what we call the locks. Now, anything in our body, when the system, when we lock, we usually lock and we make blocks and we block our body. These locks or the bandhas are what will actually get the flow in the right way. Like, if you, for example, holding a fist, and the moment you open it, you can feel the energy suddenly moves through the hand. So how do we move the energy through the locks? Then we have incorporated the most amazing element of mantras. Once you have this whole balance coming, what happens is the mantras reinforced at any stage actually can change the brain wave. So it's like the mantra is, I am not feeling well, I am not feeling well. But suddenly you change the mantra to the mantra of the words of the Guru, which were given, and we have it in the technology of Kundalini Yoga. Those words have a very high vibration. And when you chant the words of high vibration and you stimulate the meridians, the experience is unique. I don't want to define it for anybody, but it's a unique experience. And then in the end, in the last session, you will get a taster of literally your foundation. The foundation, which means when we are strong in the root chakra, how the energy moves in the whole body and the elements, through the elements, we can really harness that force. So this is how I conceptualized the 6 sessions to really be able to create an experience myself, and then for the people who will practice,
right,
for them to have that experience.
I find it actually, the curriculum is very intuitive. I know it covers the basic elements that are involved in all of Kundalini Yoga. But I want to double down on the mantras, because I remember the first time I practiced with you, you did the tuning in, which people will see if they do the course or they see any of your classes. And it was truly magical for me personally. In fact, I told you multiple times after that. It felt like how you tuned in actually struck a chord with me in different parts of my body. Something changed. Why do you think that happens? what is the mantra? What is the force in these mantras? If you've thought about it.
So the force in the mantras, so the Adi mantra was given by the teacher himself. The Adi mantra, the meaning of the Adi mantra is I bow to the teacher within me. Ong Namo Gurudev Namo. So the force behind is when you use when you say the mantra, Ong, we take the tongue to the upper palate. The force is inside. So the moment you touch the tongue to the upper palate, this is a very ancient way of the yogis to meditate. If they don't do anything, just touching the tongue to the upper palate is going to simply stimulate the higher meridians. And your whole energy inside you will be guided to reach to the point you're meant to reach, making it a little easy because, there are many theories. But my understanding is why the mantras, the tuning in mantra. For example, Om, A-U-M is a primordial sound. Ong Namo Gurudev Namo is an extension of the mantra Om. So that's the vibration it creates. If you chant Om, you have a vibration in the body. There are 3 parts, you vibrate Om in. Ong Namo Gurudev Namo is also accessing the teacher. So the force is really the I would say the gift of the words of the teacher. And it was already known. So what happens in Kundalini Yoga is the same thing. The results were predetermined. The teacher knew what this will do on what part of the body. And the mantras add that life force, the current, the sound current, because it stimulates what we call the nad. Right?
Yeah.
So we can keep going on.
No, I understand, and I think that's why we've also invested a lot in the music. I think, even within the program, we know that.
I want to add something here with the music. That it's a very common man's thing, right? You're having a bad day, or you're having a great day. You play some music which really, really makes you go like, okay, this is what I would love to hear. Sometimes you're so teary and sad that you want to listen to music which can actually make you feel the emotions. A mantra is that sound current. It instantly changes the vibration. It stimulates your nervous system. And the moment you start to chant, you will instantly change your own vibration completely, You go in the higher realm then.
Yeah. No, I've experienced some of it. I have. And I know that, even classically music has been, is considered to move people a lot.
And also the meaning to each word.
Yeah, so I want to pick your brain on a very common question, a question that even I've wondered about a fair bit. Why should someone meditate?
I would just ask you in return, why should someone eat? Or why should someone drink? Or why should someone live? No, I don't know if this can really answer what I mean, but why should you meditate? It's just to know who truly you are and to know beyond what you are. We know ourselves very finitely. We know only X, Y, Z, but actually the meditation is what takes us to the infinite self.
And finally, what is, to you, what do you seek? Or what is the meaning of life?
For me, it's only love. Wholeheartedly, it's been only love. And I know for me, it's going to be legacy of love taking forward. That's it. And that's all I seek. Love in self, love in all. Nothing else.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gunjan, for joining us. And it's a pleasure to learn with you and to build more and more courses and trainings for people. Thank you so much. Satnam.